A man named Alberto Jimenez was taking his usual route during his lunch break, cutting across a vacant lot near his workplace. The overgrown area, filled with weeds and scattered trash, was a shortcut he had walked many times before. But on this particular day, something unusual caught his attention. Lying awkwardly among the brush was what looked like a discarded Christmas tree. Curious, he stepped closer. As he did, he noticed something else beneath the tree. A pair of socks. Then, what looked like the legs of a mannequin. At first, Alberto dismissed the thought that it could be anything sinister. His mind clung to the explanation that it was just a mannequin, a leftover decoration, maybe a prank. But as he moved even closer, a terrible realization settled in. This wasn't plastic. It wasn't a prop. He froze for a moment before calling for help. Within minutes, police and emergency responders arrived at the scene. The area was quickly cordoned off as investigators began their work. Soon, the identity of the victim was confirmed. It was Brianna Denison. Dear viewers, we appreciate your support and comments. It means a lot to us. Thank you for being with us. Today's chilling and unforgettable case transports us back to the winter of 2008, deep in the heart of Reno, Nevada. A place that 19-year-old Brianna Denison proudly called home. Reno wasn't just a city to her. It was filled with memories, roots, and family. For Brianna, it was the place where her life had unfolded. Sometimes beautifully, sometimes tragically. One of the earliest and most heartbreaking events in her young life came when she was only 6 years old. Her father passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. The loss shook the family to its core. Yet from that sorrow grew something powerful, an unbreakable bond between Brianna and her mother, Bridget. The two became closer than ever. They weren't just mother and daughter. They became a team, a duo, supporting one another through life's challenges with resilience and warmth. Brianna often said her mother was her hero, while Bridget described her daughter as her heart. This bond didn't go unnoticed by those around them. One of Brianna's oldest friends, Danielle, who had known her since they were toddlers in nursery school, often spoke about the unique relationship they shared. Danielle described Brianna as a gentle soul, someone with a kind heart and a bright energy that made people feel instantly at ease. She said Brianna was easily one of the most genuine and compassionate people she had ever known. Always smiling, always listening, always looking for ways to bring light into other people's lives. After graduating from high school, Brianna took a couple of years to explore her interests and figure out her path. Eventually, she decided to pursue higher education, something she had dreamed about for a long time. The West Coast, with its sunshine and universities, beckoned, and California became the next chapter in her journey. It was a bittersweet transition. While Bridget was immensely proud of her daughter's ambition, it was tough to see her go. But both of them knew that this was a necessary step forward. And even though the physical distance between them grew, their emotional closeness never wavered. While living away from Reno, Brianna remained in constant contact with her mom. She would regularly text, call, and send photos. No matter how busy she got with college life, she always made time to keep her mom updated. Whether it was about classes, new friends, or even simple things like what she had for lunch or a pretty sunset she saw from her dorm room. The winter break of 2008 brought Brianna back to Reno, and her return was met with excitement and joy. That January, she reunited with her close-knit group of hometown friends. They had made plans for a weekend filled with fun, snowboarding during the crisp daytime hours and attending parties once the stars were out. It was the kind of youthful weekend they had all been looking forward to, a much-needed break from the stresses of adulthood that were slowly creeping into their lives. On the night of Friday, January 18th, Brianna went over to her friend Katie's place. Katie lived in a rental house near the University of Nevada, Reno, a house that was known among their friends for its open-door policy. It wasn't uncommon for friends to drop in or even crash there. The atmosphere was casual, a bit chaotic, but safe, or so they thought. That night, according to another friend, Jessica was full of laughter and dancing. The group made the most of the evening, eventually all returning to Katie's house in the early hours and squeezing into her bed for sleep, or at least attempting to. Brianna, however, found the bed too crowded and decided instead to rest on the living room sofa, which was positioned right by the large sliding glass door. Unfortunately, that glass door was often left unlocked. The house, while cozy and full of friendly faces, had a reputation for being loose with security. People came and went frequently, and locking doors wasn't always top of mind. At the time, no one considered this a serious issue. That decision, though, would come to haunt them. On Saturday the 19th, Brianna spent part of her day with her mom. She had laundry to do, and afterward, the pair went to catch a new movie together. Spending time with her mother was always something she valued, and they enjoyed these small, quiet moments between the chaos of plans and parties. That night, Brianna was supposed to go out again. There was a concert on the schedule. But she wasn't feeling great. She had come down with a cold, and the idea of going out wasn't appealing. Bridget remembered her daughter saying she might just stay in. But by 9 p.m., Brianna had made up her mind. She gave her mom a warm goodbye hug and promised to keep her updated. Later, she sent a text asking if her mom wanted her to check in after she got back from the concert. Bridget, trusting her daughter's judgment, told her not to worry. After the show, Brianna and Katie met up with Jessica once more, and the trio boarded a shuttle bus headed for the Sam's Regency Casino Hotel. The night was still young, and they were eager to continue the fun. At the party, hours passed quickly. People danced, chatted, and enjoyed the music. Eventually, Jessica decided she had had enough and was ready to head home. Instead of calling someone she knew, she made a decision she would later regret. She accepted a ride from a stranger in the parking lot, a man in an SUV. Meanwhile, Brianna and Katie stayed a bit longer. Around 3:30 a.m., they caught a ride back to Katie's place with a friend. Tired and cold, they entered the house. Brianna, again, opted to sleep on the sofa near the sliding glass door. At around 4 a.m., the two girls said their goodnights. Just after that, at 4:23 a.m., Brianna sent a final text to her boyfriend, who lived in Oregon. From that moment on, the house fell completely silent. By the time morning came, Katie and Jessica began to stir. It was around 9 a.m. when they realized something odd. Brianna wasn't on the couch. Initially, no one panicked. They assumed she had gotten up early or perhaps found an open room upstairs to sleep in. Katie casually went to knock on one of the empty bedrooms where she figured Brianna might be resting and called out to her. There was no response. Still, it didn't seem alarming at first. But when Katie tried again at 9:45 a.m. and still heard nothing, a knot of concern began to form. She started pounding on the door, louder, more urgently. Silence. The panic began to rise as she realized Brianna wasn't upstairs or in any room. Her things were still there. Her bag, her clothes, her phone charger, everything. And yet, she was nowhere to be found. It was January in Reno. Temperatures outside were brutally cold. Snow blanketed the ground. There was no way Brianna would have wandered out into the freezing dark night alone and unprepared. Something wasn't right. That's when Katie picked up her phone and dialed Bridget. When Bridget heard that her daughter wasn't in the house and that all of her belongings were untouched, her heart sank. She immediately instructed Katie to call the police. Bridget herself was already grabbing her coat and keys, desperate to get to the house, terrified of what she might find. Before long, Brianna's mom, aunt, and the police had descended on the house. The urgency in the air was unmistakable. Time was of the essence, and the smallest clue could become a turning point. Upon arrival at the house where Brianna had last been seen, investigators took immediate steps to secure the scene and begin their examination. Although there was no sign of a violent struggle, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass, there were subtle but deeply troubling signs that something wasn't right. One of the most concerning discoveries was a familiar blanket. The very one Brianna had used to curl up on the couch earlier that night. It was found abandoned on the kitchen floor, far from where she had gone to sleep. That alone was enough to raise questions. Even more puzzling was the absence of a small, brown, stuffed bear. This wasn't just any toy. Brianna had brought it along that night and was using it as an additional pillow. She had always found comfort in familiar things, a trait her mother said made her feel safe in uncertain environments. But now, that bear was missing, and it was the kind of item one wouldn't leave behind without a reason. Adding to the unease, it was confirmed that the front door of the house had been left unlocked that night. It was something common in houses full of college students, a casual habit, rooted more in convenience than caution. But in this case, it may have been a fatal mistake. The sliding glass door, which Brianna had slept beside, was often unlocked as well, giving easy access to anyone determined enough to try. Within hours, the investigation escalated. Local search and rescue teams were activated, and law enforcement officers began conducting door-to-door inquiries in the surrounding neighborhood. Every resident, every household, every passerby, anyone who may have seen or heard anything that night, was approached for information. The roommates and guests at the house were all interviewed. After careful review, none were considered suspects. However, something else disturbed investigators. The pillow Brianna had used showed a small but unmistakable trace of blood. Though the amount was not overwhelming, it was enough to cause alarm. It confirmed what officers were beginning to fear. This wasn't a case of someone leaving on their own. This was something far more sinister. Lab results would soon confirm that the DNA belonged to Brianna. Following procedure, investigators swabbed surfaces for DNA. One of the most crucial samples came from the back doorknob, a logical place to check given the layout of the home. And there, on that doorknob, they found DNA from an unknown male. This wasn't just a random piece of evidence. It was potentially the key to unlocking the entire case. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the community rallied together in an extraordinary show of support. In just a matter of days, over $150,000 was raised to help expedite the processing of forensic evidence. The funds were used to fast-track DNA analysis and broaden the scope of testing. Despite these efforts, none of the samples matched anyone in the system. The suspect's DNA was submitted to CODIS, the National DNA Database. Still, no match. The person responsible had never been caught before, and had never been identified. While investigators worked behind the scenes, Bridget knew that the key to finding her daughter might lie in awareness. She threw herself into media outreach, appearing on television, speaking with newspapers, and urging the public to keep Brianna's face in mind. Her bravery and resolve touched people across the country. Blue ribbons were worn in solidarity, symbolizing hope and unity. Posters were hung across Reno and beyond. Brianna's name was no longer just local. It was national. As suspicions turned more firmly toward abduction, the FBI officially joined the case. Alongside them were two specialized agents from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, experts trained in difficult and urgent cases. Their presence brought additional tools and manpower. Police dogs were brought in to track scents, helicopters scanned the surrounding fields, and volunteers combed the snow-covered terrain, leaving no rock unturned. The entire city of Reno, it seemed, was out looking for Brianna. One line of inquiry focused on the man who had driven Jessica, Brianna's friend, home from the party. He was initially unknown, having offered her a ride in the casino parking lot. Police asked him to come forward, and fortunately, he did. She threw herself into media outreach, appearing on television, speaking with newspapers, and urging the public to keep Brianna's face in mind. Her bravery and resolve touched people across the country. Blue ribbons were worn in solidarity, symbolizing hope and unity. Posters were hung across Reno and beyond. Brianna's name was no longer just local. It was national. As suspicions turned more firmly toward abduction, the FBI officially joined the case. Alongside them were two specialized agents from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, experts trained in difficult and urgent cases. Their presence brought additional tools and manpower. Police dogs were brought in to track scents, helicopters scanned the surrounding fields, and volunteers combed the snow-covered terrain, leaving no rock unturned. The entire city of Reno, it seemed, was out looking for Brianna. One line of inquiry focused on the man who had driven Jessica, Brianna's friend, home from the party. He was initially unknown, having offered her a ride in the casino parking lot. Police asked him to come forward, and fortunately, he did. After a full interview and background check, investigators ruled him out completely. Sergeant Gerald Rhodes, who led the Regional Offender Notification Unit, announced that detectives were now speaking to every registered offender living within a 1-mile radius of Katie's house. No one would be overlooked. Nearby properties were also checked thoroughly, and it was during one of these interviews that something unexpected came to light. A neighbor who lived in the house next door told investigators something chilling. In the early hours of that Saturday morning, sometime between 4:30 and 5 a.m., he had been sitting quietly in his living room with the lights off. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed movement outside. A shadow. Then came the sound of someone attempting to open his back door. It wasn't subtle. Whoever it was, they were applying enough force that it seemed like they were trying to break in. It was a deeply unsettling account, but it added another critical piece to the puzzle. By Monday, January 21st, just 2 days after Brianna's disappearance, the search had become a full-scale operation. Hundreds of volunteers trudged through freezing snow, scanning fields, back alleys, drainage ditches, and even lifting manhole covers. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and every day more people joined the effort. The community's dedication to finding her was unwavering. At this point, investigators were also looking at patterns. Something about the crime felt disturbingly familiar. The level of planning, the subtlety, the way the suspect moved. It all pointed toward someone who had done this before. And soon, the police would uncover exactly that. The investigation turned back to the months before Brianna's disappearance, specifically to 2 attacks on young women that occurred near the University of Nevada, Reno campus. On November 13th, 2007, a 21-year-old student was walking to her car in a parking lot when she was suddenly grabbed from behind. Then, on December 16th, a 22-year-old international student was assaulted just outside her residence in the early morning hours. Fortunately, both women survived. The second victim, despite the trauma, was able to provide key details about her attacker. She described him as a white male with some facial hair, specifically hair on his chin. She mentioned his arms were tanned and muscular. Even more specific was her recollection of his vehicle, a distinctive truck with red and blue lights on the dashboard. She even remembered a baby's shoe lying on the floor inside the vehicle. An odd detail, but one that stuck with her and helped shape the profile. Importantly, in both of those cases, law enforcement had managed to collect DNA from the suspect. When the DNA from those earlier attacks was compared to the sample recovered from the doorknob at Katie's house, the result was undeniable. A match. The same man responsible for those 2 assaults was now linked to Brianna's disappearance. He wasn't just a suspect. He was a serial offender, and his crimes were growing more daring, more dangerous, and more calculated. Further evidence pointed to another attempted break-in at the home of the exchange student. She had woken up one night to hear someone trying to force open her back door. So much pressure had been applied that the entire frame had warped outward. The attacks had all occurred within an alarmingly small radius, no more than 4 city blocks, tightly clustered in a quiet university district where students should have felt safe walking to class or returning home. But now, with the connection between these attacks clear and chilling, the focus was on finding the person responsible. There was one constant through it all. The suspect was still out there, and the community was running out of time. The profile had become more specific. Law enforcement now believed they were searching for a white male, estimated to be between 28 and 40 years old, with a height range somewhere between 6 feet tall. He was reportedly driving either an SUV or an extended cab pickup, the kind of vehicles that are common enough not to raise suspicion, but large enough to be used to conceal movement or transport unnoticed. The suspect had managed to move freely through neighborhoods teeming with people, slipping between shadows and never being caught on surveillance. With growing urgency, police released a composite sketch of the man believed to be connected to the earlier attacks, and possibly even to an additional assault that had taken place in October, just blocks from the university. Although no DNA evidence was available from that case, the pattern, timeline, and location aligned too closely to be ignored. Investigators strongly believed that this could be the same individual, someone who was not just opportunistic, but intentional. The behavioral analysis was equally telling. Experts described the suspect as someone who did not stand out in a crowd, someone who blended in, perhaps a neighbor, a co-worker, someone who wouldn't raise a single red flag. But there was something far more dangerous beneath the surface. With each new incident, the level of aggression had escalated. His method was evolving, his boldness was increasing, and police feared that if he wasn't stopped soon, things would only get worse. In a public plea, law enforcement urged the public to come forward with any information, no matter how small or seemingly unrelated. They were confident there were other victims or witnesses who simply hadn't realized they'd encountered someone dangerous. And the more eyes they had, the greater the chance of a breakthrough. As the investigation intensified, community support remained unwavering. What had begun as a missing person case had become a mission, one embraced by neighbors, friends, strangers, and leaders alike. Over 300 volunteers came out to help in the ongoing search along the Truckee River, joining efforts led by none other than Nevada's First Lady, Dawn Gibbons. Speaking with emotion, she promised that no one would stop until Brianna was found and her family had answers. It was personal for her too. Her own son had once gone to school with Brianna. By now, the case had moved far beyond Reno. It was being discussed across the nation. Over 5,000 tips had poured into investigators, some more helpful than others, and more than 700 men voluntarily submitted DNA samples to help eliminate themselves from suspicion. It was an unprecedented display of support, and it gave the family hope that justice would be found. Then came a tragic discovery. It was February 15, 2008, nearly a month since Brianna had disappeared. About 8 miles from the home where she was last seen, a man named Alberto Jimenez was walking through a vacant lot near his workplace, cutting across the property on his lunch break. As he moved through the brush, something caught his eye. It looked out of place. A Christmas tree discarded on its side. Odd, but not unheard of. Yet something about the scene felt wrong. As he drew closer, he noticed a pair of socks, then what appeared to be a mannequin, partially obscured beneath the tree. At first, he dismissed the thought that it could be anything more. His mind refused to believe the alternative. But as he stepped closer, reality hit hard. This wasn't a mannequin. It was a person. Alberto ran back to his office, clearly shaken, and immediately informed his manager. Together, they returned to the scene, then called 911. Within minutes, law enforcement was at the site. A drainage culvert approximately 40 feet off Sand Hill Road, just miles from where Brianna had last been seen. The area was secured, and the investigation began. At that moment, police publicly stated what everyone feared. There was a strong possibility that it was Brianna Denison. The following day, February 16th, a formal press conference was held. Deputy Chief Jim John took the podium, speaking somberly. With heavy hearts, it was Brianna Denison. The official ruling was that she had died as the result of foul play. Her family, her friends, and an entire community were now faced with the grief of a life tragically stolen. Brianna's DNA was also tested against the DNA from the doorknob at Katie's house and from the earlier attacks near the university. The results were irrefutable. All the cases, the assault in November, the one in December, and the evidence found at the scene of her disappearance were now officially linked. The suspect wasn't just someone capable of one terrible act. He was a serial predator, whose behavior had grown more calculated and dangerous over time. The area where Brianna was found quickly became a memorial, Flowers, candles, handwritten letters, and photos were placed at the site in remembrance of a young woman whose vibrant spirit had touched so many. The loss echoed across the city like a silent storm. Now, the search for Brianna had transformed into a relentless pursuit of justice. The Reno Police Department, the FBI, and more than 41 investigators worked tirelessly around the clock. Countless hours of manpower, interviews, lab analysis, and case reviews were poured into identifying her killer. The "Bring Bree Back" signs that had once lined the streets were replaced with a new message: "Bring Bree justice." Across Reno, a solemn mood had taken hold. This wasn't just one family's heartbreak. It was a shared grief felt by thousands. Candlelight vigils were held in the cold night air. Local residents came together, lighting candles, praying, and standing in quiet remembrance. Each flicker of light symbolized a promise. Brianna would not be forgotten. Despite the efforts, weeks turned into months. Tips kept arriving, some credible, others not. But there was still no clear suspect. The person responsible had gone silent, disappeared, or so it seemed. Meanwhile, fear lingered. People double-locked doors that once went untouched. Parents watched their children more closely. The city was on edge. Then, nearly 9 months later, a new lead emerged. On November 1st, investigators received a tip that would breathe new life into the case. A woman contacted police with something unusual, something that had been bothering her for some time. She said her friend had discovered a pair of women's underwear in her ex-boyfriend's truck. The strange part, when she confronted him about it, his reaction had been defensive, odd, even suspicious. He couldn't give a straight answer. He brushed it off. But something didn't sit right. Digging deeper, police learned more. The man in question had abruptly moved away from Reno shortly after Brianna was found. He had lived in the area since 2002, but left without warning. Even more curious, he had sold the truck he'd owned at the time of the disappearance. His name was James Michael Biela, a 27-year-old construction worker. Biela had served in the United States Marine Corps, and he was known to be skilled in martial arts. He had a reputation for being physically strong, quiet, and private. Investigators discovered that he had previously worked on construction projects at the University of Nevada campus, giving him knowledge of the area and possibly access to locations few others would know how to navigate. At the time of the attacks, no DNA sample had ever been taken from him, not during any prior arrests or during routine checks. But now that he was on the radar, the investigative team made a critical decision: put him under surveillance. When police first contacted him by phone to initiate a conversation, what stood out was that he never once asked what the call was about. There was no curiosity, no confusion, no question like, "What's this regarding?" It was unusual. Most people, when told that law enforcement wants to speak with them, want to know why. But James simply accepted it and moved on. For experienced investigators, that lack of engagement raised a quiet red flag. The following day, James Biela met with officers in person. During that conversation, he refused to voluntarily provide a DNA sample, a decision that was well within his legal rights, but also one that added to the growing sense of unease around him. When asked where he had been on the night Brianna Denison went missing, James claimed he had spent the evening with his girlfriend. Police followed up on that claim immediately. They interviewed the woman in question, and her answer completely contradicted his. She made it clear that he had not been with her on the night in question, effectively dismantling his alibi. When asked if she would consent to a DNA sample from their child, she agreed, and that decision would soon become pivotal. Using the child's DNA, forensic analysts could determine that his biological father, James Biela, was an extremely likely match to the unidentified male DNA found on the doorknob at the house where Brianna had disappeared. The match wasn't exact, but the biological relationship was close enough to warrant immediate action. On November 25, 2008, As James arrived to pick up his young son from preschool, law enforcement officers were waiting. He was taken into custody without incident and was formally required to provide a DNA sample. There was no turning back now. Once the lab results were in, the results were unequivocal. It was a match. That night, Reno police issued a formal statement announcing a major breakthrough. The same DNA also tied Brianna to the 3 prior assaults on women in and around the University of Nevada, Reno campus, from October to December of 2007. James Brianna was officially charged, and at arraignment, he entered a plea of not guilty. For the community, the reaction was a mix of somber relief and quiet rage. Relief that a suspect had finally been identified, but heartbreak all over again at the reality of the loss, and frustration that it had taken so long to get here. So, who exactly was James Michael Brianna? To many, he was a quiet, unassuming figure. Neighbors remembered Brianna in vague terms. One neighbor recalled that he had been gone for several months around the time of Brianna's disappearance. At the preliminary hearing, the courtroom was packed. More than a dozen witnesses were called to the stand. Their testimony painted a clearer picture of both the attacks and the timeline surrounding Brianna's case. Most notably, the 2 surviving women from the earlier assaults gave courageous, emotional testimony. One of them described being attacked in a parking garage adjacent to the campus police station, a location that made the brazen nature of the assault even more disturbing. She was able to positively identify James Brianna as the man who had assaulted her. The second woman explained that while she never saw her attacker's face, she could describe his truck in striking detail. That information proved important when it was discovered that gray fibers found on her clothing matched those taken from the interior of Brianna's vehicle. The evidence was piling up. Brianna was denied bail, and the district attorney stated that while no decision had been made yet about whether to pursue the death penalty, all options were on the table. Initially, Brianna told his attorneys that he wanted to testify in his own defense, but after reviewing the evidence and strategy, he reversed that decision and remained silent at trial. His defense team argued that there were inconsistencies between the 3 assaults and suggested that perhaps more than one perpetrator had been involved. However, the overwhelming weight of the forensic and testimonial evidence told a different story. The prosecution also called John Lam, Brianna's former supervisor. Lam shared something deeply unsettling. On the very day Brianna was discovered, James Brianna quit his job, collected his last paycheck, and left town. When Lam asked Brianna how he felt about the discovery, Brianna reportedly said, "She probably had it coming," and then cracked a smile. While the defense would later argue that Brianna had a dark sense of humor and that this comment was meant as an inappropriate joke, not an admission of guilt, the courtroom fell silent at the gravity of that statement. The implications were difficult to ignore. The trial unfolded over the course of 3 emotionally charged weeks. Family members, forensic experts, former friends, and survivors all took the stand. The prosecution methodically built their case, laying out every detail, every connection. The defense tried to introduce doubt, but the tide had already turned. Then, on the final day, the jury retired to deliberate. There were 12 of them, 7 women and 5 men. And they selected a foreman who would speak on behalf of the group. They spent over 6 hours in deliberation, carefully reviewing the evidence one final time. He was convicted on multiple charges: first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. For the community of Reno, and especially for Brianna's loved ones, it was a verdict that brought both closure and sorrow. Justice, yes, but also the undeniable reminder that a life so full of promise had been taken far too soon. But the legal journey was far from over. With the guilty verdict delivered, the case now moved into its penalty phase. A second part of the trial where the jury would be tasked with deciding James Brianna's punishment. The stakes were as high as they come: life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. During this phase, the defense brought forward character witnesses in an effort to present mitigating circumstances. Brianna's siblings took the stand, speaking about their shared childhood and the trauma they had experienced. They described an upbringing marked by significant hardship. Their testimony was emotional, painting a picture of a boy who had grown up in chaos and carried that pain into adulthood. Biela's attorneys leaned heavily on this argument, stating that his troubled past, coupled with the fact that he had no prior criminal convictions, should be enough to spare his life. They urged the jury to consider life imprisonment without parole. But in the eyes of the jurors, the magnitude of his crimes far outweighed any circumstances from his past. They deliberated once more and returned with a unanimous decision. James Michael Biela was sentenced to death. Shortly after sentencing, the district attorney addressed the media and the public. In a statement, he reflected on the weight of the process, saying, "Cases like this always strengthen my faith and belief in the jury system. It's never easy, but when justice is served in a fair and thorough manner, it matters." On August 18th, 2010, a judge signed the death warrant, formalizing the sentence handed down by the jury. Under Nevada law, such a sentence is automatically reviewed by the Nevada Supreme Court, meaning that even though the verdict was final in the trial court, the case would enter a new phase of appellate scrutiny. For Bridget, Brianna's mother, this was a moment of strength, resilience, and unwavering love. On January 22, 2023, a discovery so horrifying and tragic sent shockwaves through Bogotá and beyond, altering the lives of countless individuals forever. It began as an ordinary day near the bustling El Dorado International Airport, when a homeless man, searching through trash bins in the hope of finding something valuable, came across a large blue suitcase. The suitcase immediately caught his attention due to its unusual size and weight. With a mix of curiosity and concern, he decided to open it. What he found inside defied comprehension. The suitcase was tightly wrapped in layers of duct tape, as though someone had gone to great lengths to conceal its contents. Undeterred, the man carefully cut through the tape. As he opened the suitcase, he encountered a white garbage bag, its surface marred by ominous bloodstains. Horrified and trembling, he immediately sought out the authorities to report the macabre find. The police responded with remarkable speed, arriving at the scene to secure the area and initiate a thorough investigation. Officers carefully opened the suitcase, revealing a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned among them. Inside was the lifeless body of a young woman, Valentina Trespalacios. Today, we will look at a true crime and examine the evidence and photographs of a woman named Valentina Trespalacios, who entered the world on December 16th, 2001 as the beloved daughter of Giovanni Trespalacios and Laura Hidalgo. Born in the vibrant city of Bogotá, Colombia's sprawling capital, Valentina was the younger of two siblings, growing up alongside her older brother, Daniel. Her early years were a series of joys and upheavals, marked by significant changes that shaped the resilient individual she later became. The family dynamic took a pivotal turn when Valentina's parents separated. The divorce left her mother, Laura Hidalgo, as the sole anchor for the children. Laura worked tirelessly to ensure a stable upbringing for Valentina and Daniel, often juggling multiple jobs to keep the household running. Her ceaseless dedication made her an unwavering source of inspiration for her children. Witnessing their mother's perseverance, Valentina and Daniel developed a profound respect for hard work, a sense of responsibility, and a drive to achieve their goals. As time passed, Laura found love again, which brought more changes to the family. Her new relationship resulted in the birth of two children, a boy and a girl. Valentina and Daniel embraced these new members with open arms, forming a tightly knit and loving family unit. These bonds became a cornerstone of Valentina's identity, teaching her the value of unity and compassion. Valentina's adolescence marked the beginning of her journey toward self-discovery. From a young age, she exhibited a fascination with music and the vibrant nightlife of Bogotá. At just 15, she set foot in her first nightclub, captivated by the energy and rhythm that pulsed through the atmosphere. This experience planted the seeds of what would later grow into her passion and career. By the age of 17, a serendipitous encounter would steer Valentina's life onto a transformative path. During one of Bogota's pulsating parties, she crossed paths with Pablo Silva, a seasoned entrepreneur with a keen eye for talent. Pablo was immediately struck by Valentina's spark and saw untapped potential in the young woman. Their initial exchanges were lighthearted, but Pablo soon proposed an idea that would change Valentina's life forever: the opportunity to explore the world of DJing. Eager and ambitious, Valentina seized the opportunity with both hands. She began dedicating her free time to learning the intricacies of DJing, immersing herself in the art of mixing beats and crafting musical experiences. Under Pablo's guidance, she advanced rapidly, refining her skills with each passing day. Their professional relationship blossomed into a mentorship that was instrumental in shaping Valentina's burgeoning career. Over the course of 2 years, Valentina poured her heart and soul into her training, culminating in her earning a professional DJ certificate in 2019. Pablo, impressed by Valentina's natural talent and unwavering commitment, took on the role of her manager. His extensive network in the entertainment industry opened doors for Valentina, securing her initial gigs at local clubs in Bogotá. These performances marked the beginning of her ascent, as her charisma and ability to connect with audiences set her apart from others in the industry. The professional partnership between Valentina and Pablo eventually evolved into a romantic relationship, adding a new dimension to their dynamic. Though their romance lasted 3 years, they parted ways amicably, maintaining a strong bond. Pablo continued to manage Valentina's career, remaining deeply invested in her success. As Valentina's career gained momentum, her reputation soared. Her unique ability to read the crowd and deliver electrifying performances made her one of the most sought-after DJs in Colombia. She became a regular fixture at prestigious venues in Bogotá and Medellin, drawing packed crowds and earning a loyal fan base. Her performances were characterized by a seamless blend of energy and artistry, leaving audiences mesmerized. Valentina's burgeoning fame soon transcended Colombia's borders. Invitations to perform at international events began pouring in, with gigs in Chile, Mexico, and Brazil broadening her horizons. These opportunities not only elevated her career, but also solidified her status as a global artist. Her expanding fan base celebrated her versatility, applauding her ability to infuse her cultural roots into her music while adapting to diverse audiences. Parallel to her music career, Valentina ventured into modeling, an industry that readily embraced her natural beauty and distinctive style. This foray into fashion opened new doors, adding another dimension to her public persona. Modeling not only increased her visibility, but also provided an additional source of income, further cementing her status as a multifaceted talent. Despite her rising fame, Valentina remained grounded. She prioritized her family, using her earnings to support her mother and younger siblings. Her acts of generosity and gifts endeared her further to her fans, who admired her unwavering dedication to her loved ones. In early 2022, Valentina's life took a dramatic turn when she crossed paths with an enigmatic figure who would profoundly impact her future. Through a popular dating app, she connected with John Poulos, a 34-year-old American. Despite their significant age difference and the language barrier between them, they forged an unexpected connection. John, whose Spanish skills were minimal, relied heavily on an online translator to communicate with Valentina. This technical hurdle did little to deter their blossoming relationship. John, enchanted by Valentina's beauty and charisma, showed remarkable persistence in communication. John Poulos's introduction to Valentina Tres Palacios' life was marked by long conversations. John talked at length about his life in Texas, his career, and his hobbies, painting the picture of a successful and intriguing man. Valentina, in turn, shared captivating stories of her burgeoning DJ career and her vibrant life in Bogotá. Over the next several weeks, their communication became increasingly intense. Daily messages formed the backbone of their connection, revealing more about their personalities and dreams. John's interest in Valentina's career was particularly striking. He often asked about her performances, upcoming plans, and aspirations in the world of music and modeling. He seemed genuinely invested in understanding her passion, which made her feel valued and supported. After several weeks of virtual communication, John proposed a personal meeting. Valentina, ever open to new experiences, agreed. A scheduled performance at a festival in Mexico provided the perfect opportunity. Mexico's location between Colombia and Texas was ideal, and it became the neutral ground for their first face-to-face encounter. John spared no effort in organizing the meeting, covering all travel expenses and ensuring that their initial interaction would be memorable. When they finally met, the chemistry between them was immediate and undeniable. Despite the language barrier, John's Spanish was limited and Valentina's English wasn't fluent. They communicated effortlessly, finding common ground through shared experiences and mutual admiration. John was captivated by Valentina's beauty, charisma, and infectious energy, while she was struck by his gallantry and apparent generosity. Their time in Mexico was spent exploring the city, savoring the local cuisine, and visiting iconic landmarks. One of the highlights was John attending Valentina's festival performance, where he was amazed by her professionalism and the adoration she received from her fans. The initial meeting was so enjoyable that the pair decided to extend their stay, turning what was meant to be a brief rendezvous into nearly 2 weeks of shared experiences. This time together solidified their bond, transforming their online acquaintance into a romantic relationship. When the time came to part ways, neither wanted to let go of what they had built. After returning to their respective countries, they agreed to continue their relationship despite the geographical distance. John's financial stability allowed him to visit Colombia frequently, strengthening their connection. Each visit was marked by grand gestures, luxurious dinners, extravagant outings, and expensive gifts that impressed not only Valentina, but also her family. His generosity extended into her professional life as well. John funded cosmetic procedures and wardrobe upgrades that helped enhance Valentina's image as a model and DJ, bolstering her confidence and career. When physical distance separated them, they maintained their relationship through regular video calls and messages. These virtual interactions were filled with discussions of daily events, future plans, and dreams of traveling the world together. John often expressed admiration for Valentina's talent and success, encouraging her to aim higher in her career. For a time, everything seemed perfect, but subtle cracks began to appear in the foundation of their relationship. John's behavior gradually became more controlling. He started to show unease about Valentina's work environment, particularly her interactions with other men in nightclubs. His insistence on frequent video calls, especially when she was at work, became a source of discomfort for Valentina. What had initially seemed like care and attentiveness began to feel like possessiveness. As their relationship deepened, John's past began to surface, casting a shadow over their bond. Unbeknownst to Valentina, John was a recently divorced father of 3 children. His marriage to Ashley Poulos had ended in January 2022, just months before he met Valentina. The details of his previous life revealed a far more complex and troubling narrative. John's former marriage had been fraught with challenges, particularly after one of his sons was diagnosed with cancer in 2018. The emotional toll of the illness, coupled with the demands of raising 3 children, strained the marriage to its breaking point. According to Ashley, John's demeanor grew increasingly aggressive during this time, leading to irreparable conflicts. The divorce proceedings unveiled even darker aspects of John's character. He had transferred all of their joint assets to an offshore trust, effectively leaving his ex-wife and children without financial support. Furthermore, he refused to pay child support, showing a complete disregard for their well-being. These revelations were not immediately known to Valentina, who only saw the side of John that he presented to her, a charming, successful, and generous man. However, over time, his controlling tendencies and jealousy became harder to ignore. John, who had initially been drawn to Valentina's success, charisma, and popularity, found himself consumed by jealousy and insecurity. He insisted that Valentina video call him every time she attended an event or performance. His need for constant updates on her whereabouts, the people she interacted with, and even her choice of clothing created a palpable strain in their relationship. For Valentina, who deeply valued her independence and professional freedom, John's demands felt suffocating and invasive. The situation escalated when John's distrust reached new heights. Convinced that Valentina might be hiding something from him, he took the drastic step of hiring a private detective to follow her. Valentina's family, who had initially viewed John as a protective and supportive partner, began to share her concerns. Although they had admired his apparent devotion to Valentina, his obsessive behavior raised alarm bells. By December 2022, the relationship had reached a breaking point. Exhausted by John's incessant need for control and his growing suspicion, Valentina decided it was time to end things. She told him she could no longer endure his toxic behavior and wanted to focus on her career and personal growth. For John, the prospect of losing Valentina was unbearable. In a desperate attempt to salvage the relationship, he revealed that he had indeed hired a private detective, claiming that the investigator had confirmed his suspicions of her infidelity. This revelation led to an explosive argument, with Valentina vehemently denying the accusations. The confrontation marked a turning point, forcing both of them to confront the fractures in their relationship. Faced with the imminent collapse of their romance, John abruptly changed tactics. He shifted from accusations to pleas, begging Valentina for forgiveness and promising to change. In a dramatic gesture, he announced his intention to move from Texas to Colombia to be closer to her. John argued that living together would help him overcome his jealousy and insecurities. To further prove his commitment, he proposed marriage, expressing a desire to build a life and family with Valentina. The sincerity of his words, combined with his apparent willingness to make drastic life changes, gave Valentina pause. She struggled to reconcile her doubts with the hope that proximity and shared experiences might heal their relationship. After much deliberation, she decided to give John another chance, agreeing to live together and work on rebuilding their connection. In early 2023, John Polos made good on his promises to Valentina Tres Palacios. On January 19, he arrived in Bogotá and rented a luxurious apartment in a prestigious residential complex for a short 4-day period. The following day, January 20th, he rented a gray Volkswagen Voyage and helped Valentina move her belongings into their new home. Valentina seemed optimistic about this new chapter in her life. During a video call with her mother, Laura Hidalgo, she conducted a cheerful virtual tour of the apartment, her voice radiating enthusiasm and hope for a fresh beginning. That same evening, the couple ventured out to the nightclub where Valentina was slated to perform as a DJ. Witnesses later recalled seeing the two together at the club, describing them as happy and enjoying themselves, slightly tipsy but not excessively intoxicated. Valentina's magnetic presence lit up the venue as her talent and energy captivated the audience. However, some onlookers noted a palpable tension emanating from John, who appeared uneasy and visibly jealous as Valentina interacted with her fans and other people. Despite his apparent discomfort, the night seemed to conclude without incident. Surveillance footage later captured the couple returning to their apartment together in the early hours of January 21st. On January 22, 2023, at approximately 2 p.m., a chilling discovery shattered the normalcy of a quiet day near the El Dorado International Airport in Bogotá. A homeless man, rummaging through trash bins in search of valuables, stumbled upon a heavy blue suitcase. Intrigued by its weight, he tried to open it and found it tightly sealed with duct tape. Cutting through the tape, he revealed a white garbage bag stained with blood. Horrified by what he had uncovered, the man immediately alerted the authorities. Police officers swiftly descended upon the scene, their faces set with grim determination as they cordoned off the area to prevent contamination of evidence. The crime scene was a desolate spot, eerily quiet, save for the murmured exchanges among the investigators. Inside the unassuming suitcase lay a macabre discovery: the lifeless body of a young woman, her features frozen in a tragic stillness that spoke volumes of her final moments. Alongside her remains, officers found a small black box containing personal items, including a student ID card and a paper identification document. These items left little doubt about the victim's identity. She was Valentina Tres Palacios, a beloved DJ celebrated for her infectious energy, magnetic charisma, and unparalleled musical talent. The shocking revelation of Valentina's identity sent ripples through the community, casting a dark shadow over those who had admired and cherished her. The grim discovery marked the beginning of an exhaustive investigation aimed at unraveling the circumstances surrounding her tragic death. Detectives immediately honed in on reconstructing the events leading up to Valentina's demise. Time became a crucial element as investigators meticulously traced her last known movements, interviewing those closest to her: family members, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. Each detail of her interactions, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was scrutinized in an effort to form a coherent timeline. A critical clue emerged early in the investigation, raising alarms among those who knew Valentina well. She had missed a scheduled performance at the Nexus Club on January 21st, an event she had eagerly anticipated. Known for her professionalism and unwavering commitment to her craft, this absence was profoundly out of character, setting off a wave of concern among her associates. One of the key figures in the investigation was Valentina's manager, Pablo Silva. Deeply unsettled by her unexplained silence, Pablo had repeatedly attempted to reach her through phone calls and messages. As the hours turned into an agonizing day without any response, Pablo's concerns escalated. In his desperation, he contacted Valentina's mother, voicing his fears and urging her to take action. This pivotal phone call not only galvanized the family into action, but also provided investigators with critical insights into Valentina's personal and professional life. The forensic examination of Valentina's body revealed the horrifying details of her final moments. According to the coroner's report, her death occurred on Saturday, January 21st, the result of a brutal combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. Her injuries bore testament to the violent struggle she endured. Bruises and abrasions concentrated on her neck, face, and forearms, clear indicators of a desperate fight for survival. Further examination uncovered lacerations inside her mouth, underscoring the sheer brutality of the attack. The fact that Valentina's body was discovered clad in a nightgown suggested that the assault likely took place as she prepared for bed or had already retired for the night. This chilling detail hinted at the element of surprise, which may have left her unable to mount an effective defense against her assailant. The emerging profile of the crime led investigators to focus on a potential motive rooted in jealousy and control. In private conversations with friends, she had confided her intention to end the relationship, a revelation that, investigators theorized, could have provoked a dangerous and ultimately deadly reaction from John. As the investigation deepened, the Bogotá police launched a comprehensive operation to gather evidence and identify potential witnesses. Detectives meticulously combed through video footage from surveillance cameras near the site where Valentina's body was discovered, as well as recordings from locations she had recently visited. Special attention was given to footage from the residential complex where Valentina had been living with John. These recordings proved instrumental in piecing together the sequence of events leading up to her death. John Paulos emerged as the prime suspect almost immediately. As Valentina's boyfriend and the last person known to have seen her alive, his actions and whereabouts were scrutinized with intense focus. Suspicion deepened when it was discovered that John had left Colombia on the very day Valentina's body was found. Investigators quickly pieced together evidence of a calculated and deliberate escape plan. On January 22, the day of the grim discovery, John boarded a flight to Panama, initiating a carefully orchestrated attempt to evade capture. John's actions in the hours and days following Valentina's death painted a picture of premeditation and intent. He deactivated all his social media accounts, effectively erasing his digital presence and making it significantly more challenging for authorities to track his movements. Additionally, John made a calculated move to turn off his phone. By eliminating the most common tool for surveillance, John ensured that his trail would be obscured. Carrying $7,000 in cash and an array of bank cards, John gave every indication that he was prepared for a prolonged period on the run. The amount of cash suggested careful premeditation, as it would allow him to operate without relying on traceable digital transactions. The multiple bank cards, likely registered under aliases or false identities, provided him with additional flexibility and a means to extend his mobility if his primary resources were compromised. John's escape strategy was a complex web of misdirection and deception, designed to confound even the most experienced investigators. His initial move involved fleeing to Panama, a country known for its bustling airports and frequent international flights, making it an ideal staging ground for his next steps. From there, he planned to board a flight bound for Istanbul, Turkey. However, Istanbul was not his final destination. It was merely a waypoint in a much larger, carefully orchestrated journey. His true goal lay in Montenegro, a small Balkan nation that held a crucial advantage for someone in his position: the absence of an extradition treaty with Colombia. This detail was no coincidence. Choice of a location that could potentially shield him from legal consequences. To further complicate matters and throw investigators off his trail, John purchased multiple tickets to alternative destinations, including São Paulo, Brazil. This tactic was a stroke of brilliance in its simplicity. By creating a series of false leads, he ensured that authorities would have to expend valuable time and resources pursuing dead ends. Moreover, John paid for all of these tickets exclusively in cash, an intentional move to eliminate any trail that could tie him to a specific itinerary. These calculated actions did not go unnoticed. Colombian authorities quickly recognized the sophistication of John's maneuvers, solidifying their belief that he was not only involved in the crime, but was also the mastermind behind it. His deliberate and methodical approach elevated him from a mere suspect to the central figure in the investigation. The evidence pointing to his guilt was compelling enough to warrant immediate and decisive action. An international arrest warrant was issued. Colombian authorities, determined to bring him to justice, enlisted the support of Interpol and other international law enforcement agencies. As part of their efforts, they announced a substantial reward: 20 million Colombian pesos, approximately $45,000, for any information leading to John's capture. The pursuit quickly escalated into a high-stakes international manhunt. John Poulos' escape attempt culminated in a dramatic turn of events. Colombian police, working in tandem with Interpol and Panamanian law enforcement, managed to apprehend John at the Panama airport mere minutes before he was scheduled to board a flight to Istanbul. The arrest, conducted under intense circumstances, marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. During the detention, officers discovered a significant amount of cash and several credit cards in his possession. Additionally, scratches were observed on John's face, which investigators speculated were consistent with defensive wounds inflicted during a struggle with Valentina Tres Palacios. When questioned about his escape, John provided an unconvincing explanation, claiming he was fleeing from the Medellin cartel. He alleged that the cartel was responsible for Valentina's murder and was now pursuing him. This narrative was quickly dismissed by investigators as implausible, given the lack of any evidence supporting such claims. His detention in Panama not only thwarted his escape, but also presented a critical opportunity for investigators to gather further evidence and interrogate the suspect. Within 24 hours of his capture, on January 26, 2023, John was extradited to Colombia. His arrival in Bogotá became a highly publicized event, drawing significant media and public attention. Security measures were heightened as John was escorted off the plane, with both police and journalists present to capture the moment. Images of John disembarking revealed the scratches on his face, reinforcing suspicions about his direct involvement in Valentina's death. Following his arrival, John was immediately transferred to a high-security detention facility for initial interrogations. During these sessions, he continued to insist on his innocence, reiterating his narrative about being pursued by a cartel. However, investigators quickly identified numerous inconsistencies in his story. Meanwhile, John's legal team began crafting a defense strategy. They argued that John's limited understanding of Spanish prevented him from fully comprehending the charges against him, a tactic designed to challenge the prosecution's case and create grounds for potential appeals. While John's defense attempted to buy time, investigators worked tirelessly to solidify their case. Surveillance footage from the residential complex where John and Valentina had stayed emerged as a critical piece of evidence. On January 19, cameras captured John checking into the apartment with a large blue suitcase, later identified as the instrument used in the crime. Additional footage from January 20 showed the couple entering the building together, a haunting record of Valentina's final moments alive. The most damning piece of video evidence surfaced from the early morning hours of January 22nd. Security cameras recorded John wheeling a heavy blue suitcase concealed under a blanket out of the apartment and loading it into the trunk of a rented car. His visible difficulty in handling the suitcase underscored its significant weight, raising immediate suspicions about its contents. Subsequent recordings tracked John's car as it navigated through the city, making a crucial stop near the location where Valentina's body was later discovered. These visual records were instrumental in establishing a clear chronology of events and linking John directly to the crime. The forensic examination provided further critical evidence. Experts determined that Valentina's death resulted from strangulation, and the extensive bruising and abrasions on her body indicated a brutal attack. Scratch marks on John's face, consistent with defensive wounds from Valentina's nails, added another layer of incriminating evidence. Combined with John's hasty escape and inconsistent explanations, these findings formed a compelling case for the prosecution, painting a chilling picture of the crime. As the investigation progressed, new details about Valentina's personal life began to surface, shedding light on potential motives for the crime. Investigators uncovered that, since November 2022, Valentina had been involved in a romantic relationship with a successful businessman named Santiago Luna. Santiago Luna, a successful businessman who lived in a luxurious penthouse and owned an enviable fleet of expensive cars, represented a stark contrast to John Poulos in Valentina Tres Palacios' life. Santiago's sophistication, wealth, and charm presented an alluring alternative to her tumultuous relationship with John. Although their relationship was kept secret from John, investigators now suspect that he may have discovered it shortly before the tragedy, setting off a chain of events that would culminate in Valentina's murder. On January 28, 2023, the first court hearing in the case against John Poulos took place. The proceedings drew widespread public and media attention, transforming the trial into a high-profile event that captivated Colombia. During the hearing, John was formally charged with the brutal murder of Valentina Tres Palacios and the concealment of evidence. Prosecutors did not hold back in their presentation, highlighting the severity and brutality of the crime. They presented compelling pieces of evidence, including surveillance footage capturing John's movements and the results of the forensic examination that outlined the extent of Valentina's injuries. The prosecution's narrative portrayed John as a man who had meticulously planned the crime, contradicting his claims of innocence. From the outset, John's defense team deployed delaying tactics in an effort to undermine the proceedings. They filed complaints alleging that his detention at Panama's airport had been conducted illegally, arguing that his rights were violated during the arrest. Despite their efforts, the court allowed the trial to proceed. Adding to the drama of the session, John's own behavior during the hearing raised eyebrows. At several points, he was seen laughing inappropriately, prompting a stern reprimand from the judge. Observers interpreted his demeanor as a sign of disrespect toward the court and a lack of gravity regarding the charges against him. Prosecutors advanced the argument that John had premeditated the crime. They pointed to the short-term nature of his apartment rental, a mere 4 days, which contradicted his promises to Valentina of a long-term commitment and cohabitation. This detail, they argued, demonstrated a calculated intent to use the apartment as the setting for his horrific actions before fleeing the country. The trial promised to be lengthy and complex, with the international elements of the case adding further complications. If found guilty, John faced a maximum sentence of 40 years in prison. The severity of the charges and the mounting evidence against him suggested a grim outcome for the accused. During the court proceedings, the judge ruled that the evidence presented by prosecutors was sufficient to establish John Poulos' guilt. In addition to sentencing John to prison, the court imposed further restrictions. He was prohibited from approaching or attempting to contact Valentina's family for 20 years and ordered to be expelled from Colombia immediately upon completing his sentence. These measures were intended to protect the victim's family from further distress and ensure their safety. John's defense team announced their intention to appeal the ruling. They argued that the charges of femicide were inappropriate, contending that John should have been tried for homicide instead. Under Colombian law, femicide, the killing of a woman specifically due to her gender, is treated as a more heinous crime than homicide and carries significantly harsher penalties. This distinction became a focal point of contention between the prosecution and the defense. Ultimately, justice was served. On Tuesday, John Poulos was sentenced to over 42 years in prison for the murder of Valentina Trespalakios.